When my daughter told me I'd embarrass her in front of her rich friends, I booked a plane ticket before she could hang up. I said it calmly at the time, almost politely. "All right, Linda, if that's how you feel." She heard only the words, not the way my fingers cramped around the phone, not the way my heart gave that stupid little jump it still gives every time she calls. At 72, you'd think a woman would be done craving her child's approval. Turns out, that particular hunger ages slower than the bones. "Mom, I'm serious," she hissed. I could hear traffic around her, a car door slamming, someone laughing in the background. "You don't understand this world here. They're not Walmart people. I can't have you just show up in your cardigan and sneakers, okay? Please. Don't come." Cardigan and sneakers. As if that was all I'd ever been to her. A pair of cheap shoes and a clearance rack sweater. "I hear you," I answered. My voice sounded too even, like I was calling a client, not my own daughter. "I won't just show up." "Promise?" she pushed. "I mean it, Mom. You'd only make it awkward. We're having some investors over this week. It's important." Investors. Deals. She always rolls those words around like hard candy, as if they make her mouth taste better than late rent and maxed out card, the words I used to fight with when she was still under my roof. "I won't embarrass you, Linda," I said. That part, at least, was the truth. She took it as surrender, gave a quick, relieved sigh. I could feel all the way through the phone line, and then she was gone. No, "How are you, Mom?" No, "How's your hip after the fall?" No, "Is your heart still fluttering at night?" Just the flat beep of disconnection. For a while, I simply stood in my kitchen, the phone still in my hand, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the clock. Afternoon light lay on the table where Chloe used to color when they stayed with me one summer. Ben had once fallen asleep right on that vinyl tablecloth, face in a plate of mashed potatoes, and we'd laughed until we cried. I remembered their sticky hands grabbing my wrists, dragging me to the backyard to look at lightning bugs. "Don't visit," Linda had said. "You'll embarrass me." My kettle started to whistle. I turned the gas off, but I didn't pour the water. My old blue suitcase was sitting on top of the wardrobe where I'd left it after my last trip to see them. I hadn't expected that visit to be the last normal one. That's the thing about last times. You never recognize them while they're happening. The decision came quietly, without drama. One moment I was staring at the ugly floral wallpaper opposite the stove. The next my mind had already chosen. "She doesn't want you there." The children didn't say that. I pulled the chair over to the wardrobe, climbed carefully. My doctor would have scolded me for that. And dragged the suitcase down. Dust puffed up. I sneezed. The sound of it, sharp and ridiculous in the empty house, made me almost laugh. "You'd embarrass me," I repeated out loud, testing the words in my mouth. My voice shook a little, but less than I expected. "Well, Jess, that's nothing new, is it?" I opened the suitcase on the bed. Old habits took over. 3 sets of underwear, 2 blouses, 1 decent dress, the long, dark skirt that doesn't pinch my waist when I sit, my comfortable shoes, the ones Linda calls grandma shoes, as if there is something shameful in being exactly what I am. I folded everything carefully, pressing the air out with my palms. The flight schedule was still pinned to the corkboard near the phone. Linda had texted it to me months ago, when she still wanted me to visit and help with the kids while I network. I called the airline, my bank card trembling only a little between my fingers, and booked the earliest flight for the next morning. "Are you traveling alone, ma'am?" the woman on the line asked. "Yes," I said. "I always do." After I hung up, I sat down at the kitchen table. Anger would have been easier. Fury, too. Those burn fast and bright, and then leave you empty. What I felt was slower, heavier, like someone had poured wet cement into my chest and it had started to set. I thought about not telling her, about just appearing at her door and watching her face. But I'd given birth to that face. I'd kissed it after nightmares and slapped it once, exactly once, when at 16 she spat, "You're pathetic," at me. I cried harder over that slap than she did. I never did it again. No, I wouldn't give her the chance to shut me out twice. I texted her instead. Just 4 words. Landing tomorrow. Love you. There was no reply. The next morning at the airport, the girl at security called me sweetheart and took extra care with my cane. I thanked her and pretended not to see the pity in her smile. People think old age is some kind of permanent weakness, like being a toddler again. They don't understand how much you can hide behind slow movements and soft voices. On the plane, I took the window seat and watched the ground pull away. My ears popped, my heart thudded hard against my ribs, but I breathed steadily. I thought of Chloe's narrow shoulders and Ben's missing front tooth in the last photo Linda had bothered to send. I thought of the way Linda's voice had tightened when she said investors, the tight tin edge of it. Somewhere over the clouds, the anger finally came. Not loud, not hot, just this steady heat under the ribs. I looked at my own hands on my lap. Veined, freckled, the nails trimmed short. These hands had scrubbed motel bathrooms when her father left us with more bills than apologies. These hands had packed school lunches from discount bread and bruised apples. These hands had paid Linda's first deposit, her first car, her first semester, after she dropped out and changed majors and promised to pay it all back someday. She was afraid I'd embarrass her. The plane landed with a bump. People leapt up as if they were being evacuated from a sinking ship. I stayed seated until the aisle cleared, then walked slowly toward the exit. Outside, warm air hit my face, thick and different from home. I took a shuttle to the rental car lot, signed the papers, squinting at the tiny print. The young man behind the counter glanced at my ID. "First time here?" he asked, polite, distracted. "No," I said. "First time she doesn't want me here." He didn't know what to do with that, so he just handed me the keys and pointed toward the rows of cars. By the time I found the right highway, my back ached and my eyes burned. The city around me did not look like a place where my daughter should be ashamed of a mother who buys her clothes on sale. It looked like any other American sprawl. Ugly billboards, the same chains, the same tired faces behind drive-through windows. Linda's address was saved in my phone. I followed the GPS until it told me, with that cheerful, synthetic certainty, that I had arrived. Only there was no house. Just a vast Walmart parking lot, shimmering with heat, crowded with cars and carts and people pushing overloaded trolleys toward dented trunks. I pulled into a space and checked the address again, frowning. Same numbers. Same street name. Same cheerful little pin on the map, floating right here, in the middle of hundreds of parking spots painted on cracked asphalt. I sat there in the rental car with the engine still running, the cold air from the vents brushing my face, while my mind refused to accept what my eyes already understood. The map said I was here. Linda's new luxury condo, the one she'd bragged about last Christmas, describing stainless steel appliances and a rooftop pool, as if she were reading from a brochure she'd stolen. And yet I was staring at a sea of cars shimmering under a punishing sun, oil stains on the pavement, shopping carts abandoned like injured animals. No building, no entrance, just asphalt and noise. I thought maybe I'd typed the address wrong. My hands shook a little as I checked it again. But no, same numbers, same street, same pin. The pin sat right here. My daughter lived in a lie so big she'd even mapped it. I was about to call her when something small and frantic caught the corner of my eye. A movement near the far end of the parking lot, where the shade from a few thin trees hardly made a difference in the heat. A child's head rose from the back seat of a dusty blue SUV. Then another. A pair of eyes, wide and tired, watching the world from behind a sun-bleached window. My heart did something sharp then, like it stumbled inside my chest. I knew those eyes. I'd kissed those eyelids when they were still soft with baby fat. Chloe, and next to her, a smaller shape slumped with a blanket pulled to his chin. Ben. I don't remember getting out of the car. My legs carried me before thought caught up. My breath came in short puffs, the kind you get when fear sprints faster than your age can manage. I crossed the hot pavement until I stood in front of that SUV. The windows were cracked open. The air smelled of old French fries, stale socks, and something sour beneath it. The smell of too many nights without washing, too many mornings without breakfast. Chloe saw me first. Her face froze, then crumpled, then brightened with a hope she tried to swallow back. "Grandma?" she whispered, as if I might disappear if she said it too loudly. I reached for the handle. It was locked. "Sweetheart, where's your mother?" Before Chloe could answer, the driver's door swung open. Linda stepped out like a wild animal that had been startled in its den. Hair oily, face flushed, jaw tight. Not polished, not expensive, not even stable. My daughter, who claimed I'd embarrass her, stood there in creased leggings and a shirt stained under the arms. "What are you doing here?" she snapped, slamming the door behind her as if she could hide the entire truth with that one motion. "I texted you," I answered. "I said I was coming." "And I said not to." Her voice sharpened. "God, Mom, don't you ever listen." But I wasn't listening to her. I was looking at the children, at Chloe's chapped lips, at Ben's two thin wrists, at the heap of blankets and grocery bags stuffed with clothes, half open, spilling onto the floor, at the backseat window covered with a towel to block the sun. "How long have you been living here?" I asked quietly. Linda flinched as if I'd struck her. "We're not living here. It's temporary. You don't understand how things are. I've had a rough month." "A month?" I repeated, because the words felt like gravel in my mouth. She crossed her arms. "Don't start judging me. You think life is easy? You think I wanted this?" "No," I said. "I think the children didn't choose this at all." Her face twisted. "There you go with your guilt trips. You always think you know better. You always think you're some kind of saint." I kept my voice low, steady, because rage would only feed hers. "Linda, they're sweating in that car. They're hungry." "They're fine," she barked. "Stop acting like I'm some monster. We're handling it." Ben shifted then, waking. His small face appeared in the window. He saw me and tried to smile, but it wobbled. That boy used to run into my arms with the force of a puppy. Now he looked like he didn't know if he was allowed. "Grandma," he murmured. "Is it really you?" "Yes, sweetheart," I said, touching the glass with my fingertips. "I'm here." His eyes filled with a relief that nearly knocked me to my knees. Linda stepped between us. "Mom, leave, please." "I don't need this right now. I don't need you right now." "No," I said. "But they do." Something in her face, pride, exhaustion, shame, crumpled for a split second, then hardened again. "You're not taking them." "I didn't say I was," I replied. "But they're coming with me tonight. One night in a real bed. a shower, a meal. You can come too, if you want. Chloe leaned forward, hands pressed to the window. She didn't speak, but her eyes begged. Linda looked at them, at me, at the SUV, at the endless gray asphalt around us, stretching like a sentence she didn't know how to finish. Finally, with a sharp exhale, she muttered, "Fine, one night. But don't get ideas, Mom. I'm their mother." "Yes," I said softly, "and that's exactly why I came." She didn't answer. She just turned away, wiping her face with the back of her wrist. I opened the door and reached for Ben, who fell into my arms like he'd been waiting for someone strong enough to hold him. As I lifted him, his cheek pressed into my shoulder, he whispered the words that would haunt the rest of the night. "Grandma, can we stay with you forever?" Ben's arms tightened around my neck as if he thought I might vanish if he let go. His small body was warm, too warm, and the dampness on his hairline told me he'd been sweating in that car far longer than Linda would ever admit. Chloe climbed out next, brushing her tangled hair behind her ears as though she was embarrassed by it. Children at that age should be embarrassed by silly things. Mismatched socks, braces, school photos, not by survival. Linda watched us with that brittle posture of someone who wants to seem in control, but has no ground under her feet. She kept looking around as if expecting her imaginary rich friends to materialize and witness her humiliation. But the only witnesses were a couple loading groceries into a pickup truck and a bored teenager collecting shopping carts. "Where are you taking them?" she demanded. "To a motel," I answered. "The one on Cypress Road. I already passed it earlier." Her eyes narrowed, calculating. "I should follow you." "You can," I said gently. "Or you can come with us in my car." That was the wrong offer. Her jaw tightened. "I'm not riding with you, Mom. You'll just give me that disappointed look the whole time." I didn't remind her that I hadn't looked at her with disappointment. Real disappointment. In decades. I'd always been careful with my face around her, the way mothers are around daughters who bruise easily and hit back hard. "Suit yourself," I said. "We'll meet you there." She hesitated, then nodded stiffly and climbed into the SUV. The engine sputtered twice before catching. Another small truth that didn't match her big lies. I buckled the children into the back seat of the rental car. Ben kept holding my sleeve, as if checking I was solid. Chloe sat quietly, her hands knotted together, the way I used to knot mine when her mother was 15 and coming home with excuses that smelled like smoke and danger. The drive was short, 5 minutes at most, but the silence inside the car stretched long and delicate. I didn't rush them. Children unfold truth slowly when they've been taught to hide it. When we pulled into the motel lot, Linda parked a few spaces away and stayed inside her vehicle. Arms crossed, chin high, the posture of someone pretending they aren't drowning. I brought the children up to the room first. 2 queen beds, a small table, curtains that had seen better decades. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and old carpet. Chloe stepped inside and froze, eyes flicking from the beds to the bathroom door. "It's okay," I told her, placing my hand on her back. "You can breathe." She nodded quickly, but the breath she took shuddered on its way in. Ben wandered toward the table, touching everything. The ice bucket, the remote, the lamp. He moved with the tentative curiosity of a child who hadn't been in a real room for too long. "Grandma," he asked quietly, "can we take baths?" My throat tightened. Of course. When Linda finally came up, she didn't knock. She barged in as though the door had offended her. Her hair was tied back now, hastily, and she'd wiped her face, but the exhaustion clung to her like a second skin. "This is just for tonight," she said before I could speak. "Don't get attached to this idea that you're rescuing anyone." I let her words settle like dust. "I didn't say I was rescuing anyone. You're thinking it. Thinking isn't a crime." Her mouth twisted. She looked around the room, the beds, the bathroom, the faint smell of safety, and something flickered across her expression. Envy, resentment, longing. A mix I'd seen before, back when she was young and watching other girls get what she thought she deserved without effort. She sank onto the edge of one bed, elbows on her knees. "Mom, things just got complicated." "That's all." "How long have you been living in the car, Linda?" She stiffened. "We're not living in the car." "Chloe," I said without raising my voice. "How long?" The girl looked at her mother first, the way children look at a stop sign before crossing. Then she whispered, "Since spring break." My heart clenched. Spring break had been months ago. Linda jumped up. "Chloe, stop exaggerating." Ben chimed in, matter of fact as children often are. "But Mom, we haven't slept in a bed since." "That's enough," Linda snapped, her voice cracking. I stood between her and the children before thinking. Not aggressively, just there. A small old woman who had spent a lifetime making herself smaller for this daughter, now finally remembering she'd once had a spine. "Linda," I said softly, "sit down." She opened her mouth to argue, then shut it. Slowly, she sat. They say breaking points are loud, dramatic, violent. But hers wasn't. Hers was quiet. Just the small tremble in her hands, the quick blink of someone fighting tears she believes she has no right to. "Everything fell apart," she whispered. "You wouldn't understand." "Then help me," I said. "Make me understand." She shook her head, eyes sliding away. "I can't. Not tonight." She grabbed her purse and stood. "They can stay. I'll come back in the morning." "Will you?" She flinched again. "I said I will." She left before I could answer, the door rattling in her wake. When the room settled into silence, Chloe crawled onto the nearest bed and curled into a small shape, face turned to the wall. Ben climbed into my lap and tucked his head under my chin the way he used to when he was little. "Grandma," he whispered, "please don't leave us." "I won't," I said, even though I didn't yet know how I could keep that promise, but I meant it with everything left in me. Because tonight, for the first time, I finally understood. Linda hadn't just lied to me. She'd been living inside a lie so deep she expected her children to drown in it with her, and I would not let that happen. Ben fell asleep sitting up, his cheek pressed against my shoulder, his small hands curled into the fabric of my blouse, as if he were afraid the world might snatch him away again. I eased him onto the bed, tucking the blanket around his thin frame, and watched his chest rise and fall in the slow, uneven rhythm of a child who hasn't slept safely in a long time. Chloe was already under the covers of the other bed, facing the wall, as though she didn't want to be seen. I knew that posture. It was the posture of someone who had learned that being visible sometimes meant being hurt. I pulled a chair close to the window and sat there quietly, listening to the hum of the motel air conditioner, the occasional rumble of a truck on the highway, the creaking pipes behind the walls. Ordinary sounds. Safe sounds. Sounds children should fall asleep to. Not the honking of cars in a Walmart parking lot or the shouting of strangers 2 spaces away. My phone lit up on the table. A message from Linda. "Don't make this worse. I'll pick them up tomorrow." No apology. No gratitude. just suspicion, as if I were the danger. I didn't reply. Instead, I stepped into the bathroom and let the water run until steam fogged the little mirror. I washed my face slowly, the heat easing the ache in my temples. When I came out again, Chloe was sitting upright, knees pulled to her chest, her eyes glossy. "Grandma," she whispered, "are we in trouble?" "No, sweetheart," I said, sitting beside her. "You're safe tonight." She hesitated, then leaned against me with a stiffness that broke my heart. Children shouldn't have to hold themselves like that, braced for disappointment. After a moment, she asked, "Is Mom okay?" The question every child learns to ask when the parent fails them, the instinct to protect the one who should protect them. I smoothed her hair. "Your mother is struggling." That was the gentlest truth I could offer. Chloe took a long breath. "She said we were going to move into a house with a yard. She said she met people who were going to help her. She said we were going to be rich soon." Rich. There it was. That familiar fantasy Linda had clung to since she was young. The shiny balloon she always chased until it burst and left her bleeding from her own hope. "Did you believe her?" I asked softly. Chloe shrugged one shoulder. "She believes it. So, I think I should too." Children will walk barefoot across broken glass to stay loyal to a parent who isn't loyal to them. "She loves you," I said, though love alone had never been enough to raise a child well. "She just can't see clearly right now." Chloe rested her cheek on her knees. "Ben cries at night. He tries to be quiet, but I hear him." Her voice thinned. I didn't know what to do. I held her until her breathing steadied. Then I helped her lie down again, tucking the blanket around her legs the way I used to when she was little, when bedtime meant storybooks and warm milk instead of fear and exhaustion. I stroked her hair until her eyes closed. When both children were asleep, I finally allowed myself to stop moving. The room felt too still, too honest. I sat again in the chair by the window and stared out at the neon motel sign, blinking its tired red glow against the night sky. I tried to imagine what had brought Linda to this point. I thought of the phone calls over the last year, hurried, distracted ones. The new job she said she'd gotten but never described. The friends she mentioned only as people who get things done. The sudden shame when I asked for photos of the kids, the excuses. Always the excuses. I used to blame myself for the shape her life had taken. A single mother carries that habit like a scar. I wondered whether I had been too soft, too forgiving, too ready to rescue her long after she should have learned to rescue herself. Or maybe I'd simply loved her more fiercely than she ever learned to love anything. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight. I heard soft footsteps and turned. Ben had climbed out of bed and stood there, blinking sleepily. "Grandma?" he whispered. "Can I sleep with you?" "Of course, sweetheart." I lifted the blanket beside me. He crawled in and curled against me like he used to when he was 3 years old and terrified of thunderstorms. His small fingers found mine in the dark. "Will Mom be mad?" he asked. "No," I said softly. Whether that was true didn't matter tonight. He nodded, already half asleep. "You smell like home," he murmured. Those 4 words nearly undid me. I lay awake long after both children had drifted into deeper, quieter sleep. The heaviness in the air wasn't fear anymore. It was something stronger, more focused. A clarity I hadn't felt in years. Linda was slipping, drowning in choices she refused to face. But children don't get to drown simply because the adult holding them does. No court, no lawyer, no social worker had to tell me what needed to happen next. Morning would come, and with it, Linda's fury, her excuses, her manipulation. But something had shifted. Something permanent. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking toward my daughter with open hands. I was walking with a purpose, and I knew, with a certainty, that felt almost frightening. This was the last night those children would ever sleep in a car. I woke before dawn, the way older women often do, not because they want to, but because years of worry have trained the body to fear the quiet hours. The motel room was dim, washed in the pale blue of early morning. Ben was still curled against me, his breath warm on my arm, his fingers loosely wrapped around mine. On the other bed, Chloe slept in a tight little ball, her hair spread across the pillow like a dark wing. I watched them for a long moment, letting the reality of them settle into me. Children look different when they're finally safe. Heavier somehow, as though the body at last lets itself rest. I slipped out from under Ben carefully and stood, bones protesting. In the bathroom mirror, my reflection looked older than it had yesterday. Shadows under the eyes, a tightness around the mouth I didn't recognize. It wasn't fatigue, it was resolve. When I stepped back out, I found Chloe sitting up, rubbing her eyes. "Good morning, sweetheart," I said. She blinked at me, confused for a moment. Then her shoulders eased. "Is Mom here?" "Not yet." She nodded slowly. "She usually sleeps late. Sometimes the car gets really hot and we wake her up because we can't breathe." I sat beside her. "You won't have mornings like that anymore." She studied my face carefully, as though weighing whether adults could be trusted to keep promises. I didn't rush her. There was a soft knock at the door around 7. Not tentative, sharp, irritated. Linda. I opened it a few inches. She stood there with her hair pulled into a messy bun, sunglasses hiding her eyes even though the sun hadn't fully risen. "Can I come in?" she asked, but it wasn't a question. She pushed past me the way she always had, like the world was supposed to part for her. The children straightened instinctively, both trying to read her mood. Linda looked around the room with disdain, as though the cheap furniture personally offended her. "Okay," she said, clapping her hands once. "Let's get going. We have things to do." I didn't move. "What things?" "Mom, don't start." She pulled off her sunglasses, revealing eyes rimmed red from either lack of sleep or tears she'd never admit to. "I just need the kids today. We'll figure out everything else later." Chloe's hands tightened on the blanket. Ben drifted toward me until he was pressed against my hip. "Linda," I said quietly, "we need to talk first." "No, we don't." Her voice sharpened. "You've done enough. You swoop in here like some savior, and now you think you can tell me how to raise my kids. You have no idea what I've been dealing with." "Then tell me," I said. Her mouth opened, then closed. "It's complicated." I looked at her gently. "Everything you've ever asked for has been complicated, Linda. But the children aren't complicated. They need food, showers, a bed, stability." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. You think I don't know that? You think I don't want those things? I just—" She stopped, swallowed hard, then continued in a smaller voice. "I just messed up, okay?" Chloe whispered, almost too quietly to hear. "Mom? We were scared." Linda's head snapped toward her. "Don't say that. You weren't scared. You were fine." Chloe shrank back as though slapped. I stepped between them without thinking. "Linda, stop." She flinched at my tone. She rarely heard it. Don't take their side against me. I'm not taking sides, I said. I'm telling the truth. The children weren't fine. You weren't fine. You're still not. Linda's eyes went wide, then defensive. You think you can do better? You think you're perfect? I think, I said, keeping my voice steady, that I won't let them go back to that parking lot. The words dropped into the room like a stone. I felt Chloe's breath hitch, felt Ben's hand tighten against my leg. Linda stared at me as if I'd betrayed her, as if I'd taken her last defense and crushed it under my heel. You can't take them, she whispered. They're mine. I'm not taking them, I said softly. I'm protecting them. Her face twisted. You always wanted to control me, ever since I was little. You loved being the hero. I never wanted to be the hero, I answered. I just wanted you to stand on solid ground. Well, congratulations, she spat. Now you've found your proof that I'm a failure. No, I said. I found my proof that I need to step in. She grabbed her purse as if ready to flee. No, you don't get to decide. They're coming with me. Chloe's voice trembled. Mom, we don't want to go back to the car. Linda froze. Her expression wavered somewhere between denial and heartbreak. Then she whispered, It wasn't supposed to get this bad. It did, I said. But you don't have to fight me. I'm here. Her shoulders slumped then, a collapse so quiet it might have gone unnoticed if not for the years I knew her. She sank onto the chair, elbows on her knees, hands covering her face. I don't know what to do anymore, she said into her palms. You start, I answered gently, by letting them stay with me until you get help. She shook her head, tears leaking through her fingers. If people find out, your pride won't shelter those children. She didn't respond. Outside, the sun pushed over the horizon, lighting the thin curtains, bathing the room in pale gold. Linda's sobs were soft, but the children heard them. Chloe slipped off the bed and approached her mother carefully, as though approaching a wounded animal. Mom, she whispered, touching her shoulder. We love you. Linda's breath caught on a broken sound, and for the first time in years, I saw my daughter not as a woman who disappointed me, but as a frightened child herself, lost in a world she wasn't built for. But love alone wouldn't save her. I knew that now, and before this was over, she would learn it too. Linda didn't stay long after that. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her shirt, muttered something about needing air, and left the room before any of us could stop her. The door clicked shut with a small, defeated sound. Not angry, not dramatic, just tired. I waited a moment, listening for her footsteps, but she didn't return. Ben tugged on my sleeve. Is Mom mad at us? No, sweetheart, I said softly, kneeling to look him in the eyes. Your mother is mad at the world. It's not your fault. He nodded, but the crease between his brows stayed. Children carry worry like adults carry debt, quietly, hidden, until it becomes too heavy. I made simple breakfasts from what the motel offered. Tiny boxes of cereal, 2 bananas, 3 muffins wrapped in plastic that tasted more of sugar than anything real. The children didn't complain. They ate as if they hadn't seen food in days, though they tried to be polite about it, glancing at me between bites to make sure it was allowed. When they finished, Chloe helped me rinse our few dishes in the bathroom sink. Grandma, she said quietly, if Mom gets angry, can she take us back to the car? Her voice trembled on the last word. I dried my hands and turned her gently toward me. No, not today. Not tonight. Not ever again if I can help it. She swallowed hard, then nodded. Okay. I didn't tell her the truth, that Linda could walk through that door any moment and demand her children back. Legally, nothing had changed, but something had shifted in the air, in Linda's posture, in the way she collapsed into herself with that whisper. I don't know what to do anymore. It was the closest she had ever come to admitting she was unfit, even temporarily. But willingness to surrender control does not last long with her. Linda's pride always came back, sharp as broken glass. When she finally returned, almost noon now, she didn't knock. She entered with her shoulders pulled back and her chin lifted like a soldier marching into battle. She knew she couldn't win, but refused to retreat from. I've been thinking, she said, closing the door behind her. Last night was emotional. I wasn't myself. Chloe froze mid-step. Ben held onto my skirt. Linda saw it and winced. For a moment her face softened. Then the hardness returned. I'm their mother, she said, aiming the words at me. They need to come with me. Where? I asked. She hesitated. Back to the car? I continued. It's temporary, she snapped. I told you that. Temporary things shouldn't last months. She glared at me with all the old resentment she used to wear like makeup, thick, smudged, never flattering. You think you're better than me? No, I said. I just think the children deserve more than survival. Her breath hitched, but she pushed through it. If you wanted to help, you could give us money. Real money, Mom, not motel rooms and lectures. There it was. The familiar solution in her mind. Me opening my wallet until the problem vanished. Except, this problem wouldn't. This wasn't unpaid rent or a broken car. This was my daughter's life collapsing in slow motion. I'm not giving you money, I said calmly. Not this time. Linda blinked, as if the words physically struck her. Since when do you say no to me? Since last night, I answered. Since I saw your children sleeping in a parking lot. Her lips trembled, but she masked it quickly. You're trying to take them from me. I held her gaze. I'm trying to give you help. The kind you don't want. She laughed then, a small, brittle sound. What? Therapy? Shelters? The government? You think I'm going to drag my kids through that? They're already being dragged through worse. Her face crumpled, anger first, then fear, then something raw, a wounded animal's look. You're turning them against me, she whispered. No, I said. You're turning them against yourself, Linda. I'm just watching it happen. She stared at the children, really stared. Ben's wide eyes, Chloe's trembling hands. And for the span of a breath, she was just a mother looking at the mess she'd made. Then she looked away. I need time, she muttered. Just time to figure things out. You can have time, I said. But they stay with me until then. Her head jerked up. Absolutely not. They stay, I repeated, softer but firmer. Silence stretched between us like a pulled thread, one breath away from snapping. Finally, she exhaled. One day, she said. One day only. Then we talk again. Fine, I replied. She turned toward the door, pausing only long enough to say, Don't fill their heads with lies. I don't need to, I said. They already know the truth. She flinched and left. The children didn't speak for a long time. Then Ben climbed into my lap again, his voice trembling in my ear. Grandma, will we really stay with you? I held him close. Yes, I whispered. For longer than your mother thinks. And in that moment, a quiet certainty settled deep inside me. Linda wasn't losing control. She had already lost it. And soon I would have to act. Chloe seemed quieter than usual the rest of the morning, like someone walking through a room full of fragile things. Ben stayed close to me, never more than an arm's length away, as if afraid Linda might appear in the doorway and drag him back to the car. I didn't ask anything of them. I let silence settle, let safety seep slowly into their bones. Children don't open quickly. They soften only when they finally believe no one is watching for weakness. Around lunchtime, I offered sandwiches from the motel lobby, cold turkey, a slice of cheese, nothing remarkable. But the children ate as if the bread itself were a comfort. Afterward, Ben drifted toward the bathroom to play with the running water, enchanted by the simple pleasure of a working faucet. Chloe lingered near the table, twisting the corner of a napkin until it nearly tore. "Grandma?" she said at last. "Yes, sweetheart." She hesitated. "If we tell you something, do you promise not to tell Mom we told you?" I sat down beside her. "I promise to protect you. That's the only promise I make." She looked at me then, truly looked, searching for something in my face. Maybe strength, maybe permission, maybe just softness. "She used to try," Chloe said finally. "Mom really did try. But after the last job ended, she kept saying she had new opportunities coming, big ones. People who believed in her. But those people..." Her voice thinned. "They never showed up." I nodded gently. "What happened then?" "She said we needed to stay mobile." Chloe made little quotes with her fingers, an adult gesture that didn't belong on a child. "So we drove from place to place. Sometimes she cleaned houses for cash. Sometimes she sold things in parking lots. Sometimes she just cried." I felt something inside me break, not in a sharp way, but in a slow, sinking one. "Was anyone hurting her?" I asked carefully. Chloe shook her head. "Not like that. Just..." She kept getting messages from people she owed money to. She'd close the phone really fast when she saw their names. I breathed out slowly. Debt. Desperation. Shame. The oldest companions of a person spiraling. "And you and Ben?" I asked. "Did you feel safe?" Chloe pressed her lips together. "I tried to be brave for him. When Mom slept in the front seat, I stayed awake sometimes. Just to make sure no one came near the car. The image of my granddaughter, 11 years old, thin as a reed, keeping vigil in a parking lot, nearly undid me. But I didn't cry. Not then. Children don't need your tears. They need your steadiness," she continued, words gaining speed now that she'd begun. "Sometimes she got angry for no reason, not yelling angry, just cold, like she couldn't see us. Ben would try to talk to her, and she wouldn't hear him. He started thinking he did something wrong." I took her hand. "He didn't. Neither of you did." Chloe nodded faintly. "I know, but he doesn't." For a moment we sat there, our fingers lightly linked, the motel air conditioner humming its low, steady tune. Then she asked in the smallest voice I'd heard from her yet, "Grandma, can we stay with you? For real?" "Not just today." I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't know. I knew the moment she asked, the moment I saw her in that parking lot. But words carry weight, and promises even more. I wanted mine to land softly, yet firmly enough that she could trust it. Yes, I said, as long as you need, until your mother is better, until you feel safe. Chloe's breath left her in a shaky rush, as though she'd been holding it for months. But Mom will be mad, she whispered. She'll say you're taking her life away. She'll say many things, I answered, but none of them will change what's right. Chloe's eyes filled with tears. She tried desperately to blink away. I don't want to choose between you and her. You're not choosing, I said gently. Adults choose. Children endure the consequences. She pressed her face into my shoulder then, letting herself cry without sound. I stroked her hair, remembering the tiny baby she had once been, the way her mother had cried the first time she held her. Linda had loved her children fiercely, but fiercely was not the same as well. Ben emerged from the bathroom with wet sleeves and a grin. Grandma, the sink works. It really works. That simple joy cut through the heaviness like a small beam of sunlight. I smiled. Yes, sweetheart, it does. Chloe wiped her cheeks quickly, embarrassed to be seen crying, but Ben only wrapped his arms around her waist. She rested her hand on his head, a gesture far too old for someone her age. Watching them, I understood something clearly for the first time. These children had been raising each other in every way that mattered. And if Linda couldn't stand on her own, then I would have to stand for all three of them. I didn't know yet what steps I would take, but I knew one thing with a certainty as sharp as breath on a cold morning. Whatever storm Linda had created, the children would not weather it alone again. Not while I was still alive. By the time I reached home, the last of the daylight had drained from the sky, leaving the street washed in that metallic blue that always makes me think of winter mornings from my childhood. My porch light flickered as I approached, a small signal of welcome from a house that had never betrayed me the way my own son had. I stepped inside, hung up my coat, and let the quiet settle around me. My phone vibrated again. Another message from Joshua. Answer me. This is serious, as if I didn't already know. I placed the phone face down on the kitchen table and put on the kettle. I needed the small ritual of tea, the warmth of the cup in my hands, something steady to anchor myself to before facing whatever storm my son was preparing. While the water boiled, I looked through the window across the street. Lily's television cast a faint glow against her curtains. She was probably watching one of those mystery series she loved. I envied for a moment the simple comfort of her evening. The kettle clicked off, and I poured the hot water over the tea leaves. The scent of Earl Grey rose gently, familiar, unchanging. I took my cup to the living room and lowered myself into the armchair. Only then did I turn the phone over and read the newest message. What did you do at the bank? They froze everything. Mom, this isn't funny. Funny. The word sat bitter on my tongue. I typed slowly, deliberately. I protected what is mine. Almost immediately the phone rang. I let it ring twice before answering. Mom, he said, breathless. I need you to tell them there's been a misunderstanding. The bank is acting like I committed a crime. You did, I said, a sharp inhale on the other end. Mom, don't do this. You don't understand how this will look. My investors, my partners, they're already panicking. I can fix this if you just cooperate. Fix it, I repeated. Joshua, you took money that wasn't yours. You forged documents. You gambled my home and my name. You're overreacting, he snapped, his patience thinning. This is business. People do things like this all the time. I don't, I said. He groaned, a frustrated, childish sound I hadn't heard in decades. Mom, please! I'm begging you! You're ruining my life! That stung more than I wanted to admit. I had spent years quietly helping him, stitching together his failures, making sure the consequences never landed too heavily on his shoulders. And somehow, he still believed he was the victim. I'm not ruining your life, I said. I'm simply stepping out of the way. There was silence then, long and heavy. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed. It was colder, calculated. You don't know what you've started. Yes, I said softly. I do. I ended the call before he could reply. My hand trembled slightly as I set the phone down, but the trembling wasn't fear. It was something closer to release. A few minutes later, the porch light across the street blinked twice. Lily's subtle way of checking whether I was awake. A neighbor's small kindness, unnoticed by most, but not by me. I flicked my living room light in response. I was here. I was fine. Or at least I would be. I sipped my tea, now cooling. The events of the day ran through my mind in a slow, methodical line. The forged signature, the notary's shame, the attorney's steady voice explaining the consequences Joshua would face. A younger woman might have cried. A different mother might have softened. But years of quiet disappointments had carved something stronger in me than grief. Outside, a car passed slowly, its headlights sweeping across my living room wall. For a moment, I imagined it was Joshua, driving by to see if my lights were on, planning what he would say next, how he would twist this story into one where he was the wronged party. But the car kept going, and the street returned to silence. I finished my tea and set the cup gently on the table. There was no turning back now, not for him and not for me. The steps had been set in motion, and whether he understood it or not, I was no longer the woman he could push aside with a few hurried words. If this was a war, it was one he had started long before today. I had simply stopped pretending not to notice. Linda didn't return that afternoon. She sent a single text, "Be back later," and nothing more. No apology, no explanation. Just those 3 words, as empty and shapeless as the promises she'd been living on. I stared at the message for a long moment before setting the phone aside. I'd learned long ago that chasing her never led anywhere good. With the children fed and washed and calmer than I'd seen them in months, I decided it was time for answers of a different kind. Not from Linda. From someone who could tell me what my options were. While Chloe helped Ben draw airplanes on motel stationery, I told them I needed to step downstairs for a moment and ask them to stay inside, lock the door, and not open it for anyone except me. Chloe nodded with a seriousness that didn't belong on her face. Ben promised, "We'll be good," as though danger came from misbehaving instead of the world around them. Downstairs, in the corner of the lobby near the vending machines, a bulletin board stood with a clutter of local flyers. Lost dogs, church events, babysitting services. One card caught my eye. Free legal aid clinic, custody, housing, family safety. It listed hours and the address of a community center just 4 blocks away. I stared at the card for a long moment, feeling something inside me tighten, then settle. I wasn't the kind of woman who reached for the law lightly. But this situation was no longer something to soothe with warm meals and soft words. This was a mother losing her footing and taking her children with her. I took the card, tucked it into my handbag, and walked back upstairs. Chloe looked up as I entered, searching my face. "Everything okay?" "Yes," I said. "I just needed information." I didn't explain. Not yet. Children shouldn't have to carry the knowledge of custody laws or emergency procedures. They carried enough already. I told them we were going for a walk. Fresh air would do them good, and truthfully, I needed the walk myself. My mind felt too full, too heavy. We walked hand in hand to the community center, a squat beige building with peeling paint and a faded mural of smiling families. Inside, a volunteer handed me a clipboard and said someone could speak with me in 15 minutes. I didn't tell the children where we were or why. I simply said, "Sit with me, stay close." They did. When my name was called, "Jessica?" I stood, feeling the weight of what I was about to do press against my ribs. The children watched me, but I shook my head gently. "Just stay right here. I'll be back in a few minutes." They nodded, eyes wide, legs swinging nervously beneath the chairs. The attorney was a woman in her 40s with a steady gaze and a tired, kind smile. She introduced herself, asked how she could help, and I told her everything. Not all the details, those would come later, but enough. The car, the parking lot, the months drifting from place to place, Linda's inability to provide stable housing, the children's exhaustion, their fear. I expected judgment, a reprimand, maybe even disbelief. But the woman simply nodded. "You did the right thing bringing them here today." She explained the basics, that temporary custody could be requested if the children were at immediate risk, that documentation mattered, that consistent neglect, even born of desperation, was still neglect under the law. She explained that if I wanted to protect them long term, I'd need evidence, photos, statements, medical reports if applicable. She said the courts looked kindly on grandparents who stepped up when parents faltered. Her voice softened when she asked, "Do you feel your daughter is capable of improving her situation soon?" I wanted to lie. I wanted to say yes, that Linda would find her footing again. But the truth rose quietly, like a slow tide. "No," I said, "not right now." The attorney gave me a packet of forms, instructions, and her card. "If things escalate," she said, "call immediately. Don't wait." I thanked her and walked back to the lobby, my legs trembling in a way that came not from age but from the weight of the step I'd just taken. Ben ran to me the moment he saw me. "Grandma, you were gone forever." "It was only a few minutes," I said, smoothing his hair. Chloe looked at the paperwork in my hand, but didn't ask. She understood more than she let on. We stepped outside into the warm afternoon. The sky was bluer than it had any right to be on a day like this. "Grandma," Chloe said suddenly, her voice small, "are we safe now?" I looked down at her, then at Ben, who had slipped his hand into mine. "Yes," I said, "you're safe." But safety wasn't enough, not anymore. Because somewhere in that quiet consultation room, while papers rustled and children waited, and my heart hammered against my ribs, one simple truth had rooted itself inside me. I wasn't just preparing to protect them. I was preparing to fight. Linda showed up that evening just as the sun dipped behind the motel roof, painting the sky in dull orange streaks. She didn't knock. She never knocked. She pushed the door open with the force of someone who believes everything in front of her belongs to her, by default. The children stiffened instantly. Chloe's hand tightened on her pencil. Ben slid off the bed and pressed himself against my side without a word. I felt his small, trembling shoulder against my ribs. Linda's eyes were red, not from crying, but from anger. Anger suited her more than sorrow. She wore it like familiar clothing. She stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, chin high, trying to mask how lost she really was. "We need to talk," she said, gesturing for me to follow her outside. It was not a request. It was a demand sharpened by fear. I stepped out onto the walkway, closing the door just enough that the children couldn't hear, but not enough to shut them out completely. Linda paced like she had too much energy trapped inside her bones. Finally, she stopped and glared at me. "I know what you're doing," she said, "and it stops now." "What am I doing?" "You're trying to take my kids. Don't play dumb." I let a breath out slowly. "Linda, I'm trying to protect them." "You're trying to replace me," she snapped. "You think because I hit a rough patch, you can swoop in and act like you're some kind of savior." "This isn't a rough patch," I said quietly. "It's a collapse, Linda." Her face flushed. "You think I don't know that? You think I like any of this? But they're mine. You don't get to decide what happens to them." "I'm not deciding," I said. "I'm responding to what already happened." She laughed, short and bitter. "So what now?" "You take them to Grandma's retirement cottage and pretend you're 30 years younger? You can barely lift a grocery bag, Mom." I didn't flinch. I can lift what matters. She froze for one breath, just long enough for truth to slip through her defenses. Then her eyes hardened again. "You went to that legal clinic," she said. "Don't deny it. I saw the papers in your bag when you opened it earlier, custody forms. Seriously? You're going to drag me into court? I'll do whatever I must to keep them safe." "Safe?" Her voice cracked. "They're safe with me. In a car? In a parking lot? With debt collectors calling you at all hours? With no food, no stability, no bed?" "I said it's temporary." Her shout bounced off the concrete, drawing a glance from a man smoking at the far end of the walkway. She lowered her voice. "You don't understand what I'm dealing with. Those people I owe, they're dangerous. I've been trying to fix it. I've been trying so hard, Mom." There it was, the truth leaking out in small, jagged pieces. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked softly. "Because you judge me." "I'm your mother. I would have helped." "You always say that," she murmured, voice trembling at the edges. "But you don't know what it's like to fail over and over. You don't know what it's like to watch your life collapse while everyone else keeps moving on." "I do," I said gently. "I lived those years after your father died. But I didn't drag my children into the wreckage." She recoiled like I'd struck her. "You think you're better than me." "No," I answered. "I think I'm older than you, and I've learned from mistakes you're still making." Linda's eyes filled not with tears, but with fury and humiliation. "If you file those papers," she whispered, "I will never forgive you." I held her gaze. "Your forgiveness isn't what those children need." Her breath hitched, her chest rising and falling too fast. "Fine," she said. "Keep them tonight. But tomorrow morning, I'm taking them. End of discussion." "Tomorrow," I said. "We'll see." She stormed away, her footsteps echoing harshly along the walkway. When she turned the corner, I let myself breathe again. Only then did I realize how hard my hands were shaking. Inside the room, Chloe looked at me with wide, searching eyes. Ben ran to me, pressing his face into my waist, as if trying to hide from the world. I knelt beside them both, holding one child in each arm. "Grandma?" Chloe whispered. "What did Mom say?" I pressed my cheek to her hair. "She said she's scared." "Of what?" "Everything." Ben looked up at me. "Will she take us tomorrow?" I didn't lie to him. Children can smell false comfort. "I won't let her take you somewhere unsafe." He nodded slowly, accepting the promise in the shape I gave it. As night fell and the children drifted into uneasy sleep, I sat in the chair by the window again, watching headlights sweep across the parking lot below. The truth was clear now. Linda wasn't going to get better on her own. She wasn't going to choose the hard road to recovery. She was going to cling to the children, because they were the last pieces of her life she still controlled. And if she forced me into a battle tomorrow, so be it. I'd spent a lifetime avoiding conflict with her, but for these children, I was prepared to walk into fire. And this time, I would not back down. I barely slept that night, not because of age or aching joints, but because every time I closed my eyes, I imagined waking to the sound of the door opening and Linda standing there, wild with panic, ready to drag the children away. The thought made my stomach twist. I kept replaying our conversation on the walkway, the look in her eyes when she realized I had begun to pull away from her way of living. It wasn't anger that haunted me. It was the desperation underneath it, a desperation that can make a person reckless. By the time dawn crept in, pale and uncertain, I was already sitting fully dressed in the chair by the window. Chloe stirred first, blinking at me through a tangle of hair. "Grandma, you didn't sleep," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. "I rested," I answered, offering her a small smile. Ben woke next, climbing into my lap with a sigh, as though mornings had always been this peaceful. We ate the motel's meager breakfast again, though this time Chloe insisted on making the plates herself. Some children become fragile under stress. Others become miniature adults. Chloe had become the latter long before she should have. Around 9, a sharp knock rattled the door. Not hesitant, not angry, impatient. Linda. The children froze, each in their own way. Chloe stiffening like a deer, Ben grabbing my hand. I opened the door only a crack and stepped into the doorway to block her view inside. "Morning," Linda said, though nothing in her tone suggested she cared whether the morning was good or not. Her appearance was slightly improved. Clean shirt, brushed hair, but her eyes betrayed the truth. She hadn't slept either. "Can we talk?" she asked. "I'm listening." She exhaled sharply. "I want the kids, now." Behind me, I heard Chloe's breath catch. I didn't look back. I kept my gaze on Linda. "Where will you take them?" "We found a place," she said quickly. "A friend offered a couch for a few nights. It's better than here." "What friend? You don't know him." That was enough of an answer by itself. "No," I said. "They're not going with a stranger." She threw her hands up. "You won't even give me a chance. I'm trying, Mom. I'm actually trying today." "I believe you are trying," I said gently, "but trying is not the same as being able." Her face reddened, humiliation burning bright. "You have no right to say that." "I have every right," I answered. "I'm the one who found them living in a parking lot." She stepped forward, lowering her voice. "If you don't give them to me, I'll call the police." "You can," I said calmly. "But they won't remove children from a safe environment to return them to a car." Linda blinked, thrown off by my steadiness. She'd expected fear. She'd expected pleading. She didn't know what to do with resolve. "How dare you?" she whispered. "After everything I've survived, you're turning my own children against me." "No," I said. "You're pushing them away through choices you can't control anymore." For a moment, her mask slipped. The exhaustion underneath it was so deep, so unguarded. She looked like a child, my child, lost in a storm she'd created but didn't know how to escape. "I can't lose them," she said, voice trembling. "They're all I have left." "You won't lose them," I replied softly. "But you need help before you can take care of them again." "I don't need help," she snapped. but the words fell flat, stripped of conviction. "You do," I said. "And admitting it isn't failure, it's responsibility." She took a shaky step back. "If you go through with this custody thing—" Her breath hitched. "I'll never forgive you." I looked at her for a long moment, the daughter I had carried, fed, scolded, prayed for, worried over, forgiven too many times. "Linda," I said quietly, "forgiveness is not the priority right now." Her eyes narrowed, fury returning to shield her from the truth she didn't want to face. "You think you're winning," she hissed. "But I'm their mother. You can't replace me." "I don't want to replace you," I said. "I want you to get well." She shook her head violently. "You're doing this for your ego. You like being the hero." I let that accusation fall between us without arguing. People in pain often strike at the hand, reaching for them. "I'll be back," she said finally, "with someone who knows my rights." "Good," I answered. "Bring them." She stared at me like she didn't recognize who I had become. Then she turned and walked away, shoulders shaking though she refused to cry. When I closed the door behind her, the children rushed to me. Chloe looked terrified. Ben clung to my waist. "Is she taking us?" he asked. "No," I said firmly. "Not today." "Tomorrow?" Chloe whispered. "No," I repeated. "Not until it's safe." They both leaned into me, and I wrapped my arms around them, feeling their hearts beating like frightened birds. Linda could threaten, argue, deny, but the truth was already set in motion. She had lost control, and I had finally found mine. Linda didn't return that day. Not with a friend, not with the police, not with anyone who might speak on her behalf. That absence told me more about her situation than her words ever had. A confident parent comes back with strength. A parent drowning in their own chaos avoids confrontation until the water reaches their chin. By late afternoon, the children had relaxed enough to play quietly with the few things we had. Ben using plastic cups as towers, Chloe inventing stories for him in a soft, careful voice. Watching them, I felt the faint hum of purpose settling into my bones, something steadier than fear, something older than hope. It was resolve. While they occupied themselves, I took the thick packet the attorney had given me and spread it across the small table. I read each instruction with the slow precision of someone who cannot afford a mistake. The forms required dates, descriptions, examples of neglect, and evidence. Evidence. That word carried weight. I'd spent a lifetime avoiding shaming Linda, avoiding documenting anything that might make her look bad. But that same kindness had let her spiral deeper without consequences. Now, consequences were the only thing that might force her back to solid ground. I took out my phone and opened the photos I'd quietly snapped the previous day. The SUV packed with blankets and trash bags, the towels hung inside the windows to shield from the sun, the children's exhausted faces. Each image tightened something in my chest, but I didn't look away. These weren't betrayals. They were truths, and truths were the only weapon left that didn't wound the children. Next, I wrote down everything Chloe had told me in careful detail, not in a dramatic way, not with judgment, just plainly. A record of nights spent in parking lots, of fear, of heat, of hunger. Then notes about Ben. The way he flinched when Linda raised her voice. The way he clung to me as though the world might break him in half if he loosened his grip. Every detail mattered. At one point, Chloe wandered over and looked at the papers without touching them. "What are you doing, Grandma?" she asked softly, as though afraid she'd interrupt something sacred or dangerous. I'm making sure you and Ben stay safe, I said. Her eyes searched my face. Is this going to make Mom mad? It might, I said honestly, but sometimes doing what's right makes people angry. She absorbed that in silence, then nodded slowly. Okay. Later, when the children were watching a cartoon on low volume, I stepped outside to check Linda's car. The SUV was still dented on one side, the paint peeling, the interior scattered with clothes, snack wrappers, a cracked tablet, and a stack of unopened bills shoved into the glove compartment. Some envelopes were stamped final notice. One letter, half crumpled, warned of court action for unpaid loans. I took photos discreetly, not out of revenge, out of necessity. Inside the motel room, the children didn't ask where I'd gone. They were accustomed to adults disappearing on them. They didn't yet understand I was not that kind of adult. I sat with them until evening, reading a book aloud and letting the gentle cadence of the story fill the room with something like peace. As night settled, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Only one sentence. Tell the kids I love them. I'll fix things. No name, but I didn't need one. Linda's voice lived between the words, determined, hopeful, and terrified. I read the message twice, then placed the phone face down. I wished for a brief moment that love were enough. For Linda, it had never been. She loved with intensity, but without structure, without the daily steadiness that love demands. For children, love without stability is like food without nutrition, comforting for a moment, but it cannot help them grow. When the children fell asleep, Chloe curled toward Ben in protective instinct. I sat in the dim room and filled in the remaining forms. The lawyer had told me to describe everything truthfully and without embellishment. I did exactly that. By the time I finished, my handwriting had grown slightly shakier, not from doubt, but from the certainty that I had crossed a boundary from which I could not return. I gathered the papers, placed them in a folder, and slid it into my bag. My hands lingered on the zipper. I thought of Linda at 5 years old, curled on my lap after a nightmare. At 14, slamming doors. At 23, promising she would finally get it right. At 32, crying over mistakes she swore she'd never repeat. I loved her through all of it, but love didn't mean surrender. Before turning off the light, I looked once more at the children's sleeping faces, soft, unguarded, utterly trusting. They had no idea what battles were moving around them, what decisions were being made in the quiet dark. That was how it should be. Tomorrow, Linda might come back with threats, with tears, with anger. She might bring someone, police, a friend, maybe even a stranger she believed could intimidate me. But none of that mattered now. I had evidence. I had a plan. I had purpose. And for the first time in years, I no longer felt like the one bending. I felt like the one standing. Linda arrived the next morning with the kind of energy people wear when they've convinced themselves they still have control. I heard her before I saw her. The quick, angry footsteps up the motel walkway, the sharp exhale she always made when preparing to argue. I stood between her and the children before she even knocked. The door was barely open when she pushed against it, trying to shoulder her way inside as if force alone could turn time back. "I'm taking them," she announced, voice tight and trembling. "Right now." She looked different today. Clean clothes, lipstick hastily applied, hair brushed until it shone. A woman trying to present herself as someone the world shouldn't question. But her eyes betrayed her. Too wide, too frantic, darting around the room as though danger hid in every corner. "Where are you taking them?" I asked, keeping my voice level. To a friend's, she snapped. I told you that. You didn't give a name. You don't know him, okay? He's someone who understands what I'm going through. I stared at her, remembering the debts, the threats, the warnings stuffed in the glove compartment of her SUV. Is he one of the people you owe? Her face tightened. That's none of your business. It becomes my business when you put the children near people who could hurt them. Linda jabbed a finger toward me. You think I'm going to hand my kids to some criminal? God, Mom, you're so dramatic. You always make everything sound worse than it is. Is it worse? I asked. Or is it exactly as bad as it looks? Her lips parted as though she meant to answer, but instead she stepped back, pulling her purse higher on her shoulder. I brought someone, she said quietly, to make this easier. A man stepped forward from the walkway shadows, a man in his 50s, too thin, wearing a suit that hung loosely on his frame. His smile looked practiced, the kind people use when they want to look harmless without doing the work of actually being so. Morning, he said. I'm here to help mediate. Linda told me the kids have been staying with you, and she'd like them back today. Who are you? I asked. A friend, he said smoothly. Someone who cares. No name, no credentials, no explanation. Just the vague assurance every dangerous person uses. Are you a lawyer? I asked. He hesitated. Not exactly. Then this conversation is over, I said, and began to close the door. Linda shoved her hand against it. Mom, stop. You're making this worse. He's helping me get back on my feet. He understands what it's like to start over. He believes in second chances. There was something in her voice I hadn't heard before. Fear mixed with loyalty she didn't fully choose. How much do you owe him? I asked quietly. Her face drained of color. That's not. You don't. Just stop asking questions, she sputtered. I'm the mother. He's here to help me. You're not. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't step toward her. I simply reached into my bag and pulled out the folder of documents I had assembled. I held it where she could see it, but didn't open it. I spoke with legal aid, I said. I've documented everything. The children's condition, the car, the months of instability, the threats, your debts, your avoidance of safe housing, their fear. Linda stared at the folder as though it were a weapon. You wouldn't, she whispered. I would, I said. And I have. Her breathing grew ragged. You're trying to ruin my life. No, I answered. I'm trying to save your children's. The man beside her stepped closer. Ma'am, maybe we can talk about... Step away, I said, without raising my voice. He stopped. There was something in my tone he recognized. Not aggression, not fear, but certainty. It unsettled him enough that he shifted back a few inches. Linda pressed her hands to her temples. I can't believe this. First you show up uninvited, then you go behind my back, and now you're threatening me with court? I'm their mother. You can't erase that. I'm not trying to erase it, I said, but you don't have the right to drag them through the disasters you've created. Her eyes filled, not with tears of remorse, but with the hot, helpless fury of someone cornered by their own choices. You think you're some hero, she spat. You've always wanted to make me look like the bad guy. You're not a bad person, I said, but you are making dangerous decisions, and the children won't pay the price for them anymore. She shook her head, backing away a step. I'll fight you. I'll fight you in court, in public, everywhere. I'm not losing my kids because you think you know best. You're not losing them, I said. You're giving them space while you get help. I don't need help. You do, I answered simply, and so would any mother in your position. For a moment she went still, devastation flickering across her face before she smothered it with rage. This isn't over, she whispered. I know, I said. She hesitated, torn between attacking and collapsing. Then she turned abruptly, nearly knocking the man beside her off balance, and stormed down the walkway. He followed quickly, glancing back at me with thinly veiled irritation. I closed the door and leaned against it, releasing a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. The children crept toward me, eyes wide, uncertain. "Grandma," Chloe whispered, "what happens now?" I knelt to meet her gaze. "Now," I said, "we stop waiting." Because today marked the shift from fear to action. Today was the day I officially stepped into the fight. And nothing Linda brought next, tears, threats, or temporary allies, would change the path already set in motion. 2 days after Linda stormed away with her nameless companion, the court clerk called. Her voice was brisk but not unkind. The petition for temporary guardianship had been received, the documentation sufficient, and a hearing scheduled for the following morning. I thanked her, wrote down the time, and felt a long, cold certainty settle through me. The fight I had dreaded for years had finally arrived, not as an explosion, but as a quiet administrative appointment at 9:30 a.m. I didn't tell the children right away. They were playing a board game someone had left in the lobby, laughing in soft bursts that sounded like healing. I wanted to preserve that a few more hours before reality pressed in. I watched them move their pieces, negotiate rules, and tease each other gently, and I reminded myself why every paper I signed mattered. That evening, Linda texted again, short, erratic messages that shifted tone within sentences. "You're overreacting. You're ruining my life. I'm their mother. I'll fix this, I promise. Just wait." I read each one only once. There was no value in rereading pain that never changed shape. Just after sunset, she appeared at the motel again. This time she knocked, hard, rapid, insistent. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me before she could pull it open. Her face was gaunt, her eyes ringed with dark circles. Whatever bravado she'd carried before was gone. Something had hollowed her out. "I heard what you did," she said without greeting. "I heard from the clerk's office. You filed for custody." "Temporary guardianship," I corrected, "for their safety." "You had no right." "I had every right," I answered. "Someone had to stand up for them." She took a shaking breath. "I love them. You know I love them." "I know that," I said. "But love isn't the same as providing safety." Her hands balled into fists at her sides. "Why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you say something before filing papers? We could have talked." "We did talk, Linda. You didn't hear me." She blinked fast, as if against tears. I had seen her cry before, but this was different. It wasn't grief or regret. It was panic, raw and unfiltered. "They're all I have," she whispered. "You're taking the only good thing left in my life." "I'm not taking them. I'm protecting them while you rebuild yours." "And what if I never rebuild it?" she snapped, voice cracking. "What then? You get to be the hero forever. The saint who saved the poor broken children from their terrible mother?" "Stop it," I said sharply, surprising both of us. "No one is trying to replace you, Linda. But you cannot drag them into your chaos anymore. It ends now." She sank against the railing, shoulders trembling. "I don't know how to fix anything. I don't even know where to start." "You start," I said gently, "by admitting you need help. Real help. Not strangers in parking lots. Not men who make promises you can't cash. She winced, and I knew I'd hit the truth she was running from. He said he'd get me a place to stay, she murmured. Said he could talk to the people I owe. He said he believed in me. And what did he want in return? She didn't answer, and that was answer enough. I can't go to court tomorrow, she said suddenly. I can't sit there and listen to someone tell me I'm unfit. I can't do it. You must. I won't. Her voice rose again, shaky, desperate. If you show up tomorrow, I'll walk away. I swear it. I'll leave this state. I'll take them with me if I have to. She didn't say it as a threat. She said it as a drowning person grabbing for anything floating. You won't take them, I said calmly. The court will issue a protective order if you try. Her breath stuttered. You already talked to them about that? Yes. For a moment she stared at me, horrified, as though seeing a stranger wearing her mother's face. Then she shook her head slowly. I can't compete with you. I never could. This isn't a competition, Linda. It feels like one, she whispered. You're fighting the wrong enemy, I said. The enemy is the life you're living, not me. She looked down at her hands, fingers trembling. What if the judge takes them away permanently? That only happens if you refuse to change, if you vanish, if you keep choosing the wrong people. I don't know how to choose right, she said, voice breaking. I never have. For the first time in years, I felt a flash of something like grief for her, not as my daughter, but as a woman who had been lost for far too long. Then let someone guide you, I said. Let the court give you a structure. Let treatment help you. Let the truth fix what lies have ruined. Linda looked up, eyes wet and exhausted. Will you hate me if I fail? No, I said. But I will not let your failure swallow those children. She pressed a hand to her mouth as if to keep something from escaping. Sorrow, a scream, a confession. I didn't know. Then she turned and walked away down the long motel corridor, her steps uneven, her figure shrinking in the dim light until she disappeared around the corner. I stood there long after she was gone, feeling the weight of everything she couldn't carry pressing against me. When I finally returned to the room, Chloe looked at me with wide, guarded eyes, and Ben crawled into my lap without a word. Is Mom coming back? He asked. Yes, I said, but tomorrow will be different. Because tomorrow wasn't about emotion or argument or old wounds. Tomorrow was the beginning of the legal reckoning Linda had been outrunning for years. And I would be standing there, steady and unshaken, when the truth finally caught her. The morning of the hearing came with a heavy gray sky, the kind that holds its breath before rain. I dressed the children quietly, smoothing Chloe's collar, helping Ben tie his shoes even though he insisted he could do it himself. I had not slept well, but my hands were steady. Fear had long since turned into resolve, and resolve, once settled, does not tremble. The courtroom was small, not at all like the ones you see on television. No grand marble columns or echoing chambers, just a few wooden benches, a tired flag in the corner, and a judge who looked as though she had seen every version of human disappointment. The children sat beside me, Chloe straight-backed and solemn, Ben leaning into my side. Linda arrived late, breathless, hair pulled into a messy knot, her eyes darting around the room. She avoided looking at me, as if eye contact alone might shatter whatever confidence she had managed to gather. The judge spoke calmly, reading through the paperwork I'd submitted, then asking Linda a series of questions. Simple ones, practical ones, about housing, employment, the children's schooling. She couldn't answer most of them. Each time her voice faltered, I saw her shoulders draw closer, inward, as though she wished her body would fold in on itself and disappear. When the judge asked if she had stable housing, Linda lied. She said yes. She said she had a place waiting. She said the children would be safe. She said everything she thought she needed to say. But the judge had read the evidence. Photographs. Notes. Timelines. The truth was stronger than Linda's hope. Ms. Carter, the judge said gently, this is not punishment. This is protection. Linda closed her eyes, a single tear slipping down her cheek. It wasn't the tear of a woman recognizing her mistakes. It was the tear of someone who had lost the last illusion she held. The judge granted me temporary guardianship, effective immediately. There was no applause, no dramatic crescendo, just the soft sound of a gavel and the scribble of a clerk taking notes. But to me, the moment felt like the quiet snapping of a wire that had been pulled too tight for too many years. Linda left without looking back. The children watched her go, their faces more curious than devastated. That told me everything I needed to know. Back at the motel, I packed our things slowly, letting the children help. Chloe folded the blankets with careful precision. Ben carried the toiletries in both arms as though they were treasures. When we walked to the rental car, they climbed inside with relief so visible it ached to witness. We drove across town to a small rental home I'd found the day before, a modest place with peeling paint and a sagging porch, but clean, safe, and mine for as long as I needed it. The landlord didn't ask questions. He only handed me the keys and warned me not to lean on the back fence because it was older than he liked to admit. When the children stepped inside, something in them loosened. A real kitchen. 2 small bedrooms, a living room with dusty blinds and a carpet worn thin by time. None of it was glamorous, but all of it was stable. Ben ran from room to room, touching the walls, opening closets, marveling at the simple miracle of space. "Grandma," he said breathlessly, "we get our own rooms?" "Yes," I said, "if you want them." He nodded vigorously, then hugged me with all the force in his small body. Chloe stood in the doorway of her room, fingers tracing the window frame. "Is this really okay?" she asked. "Can we really stay here?" "You can," I answered. "This is home now." She gave a shaky smile, the first I'd seen that reached her eyes. We spent the afternoon unpacking, cleaning, organizing. I washed sheets, opened windows, rearranged furniture into something almost comforting. Chloe helped me stack dishes. Ben found an old toy car in a box left behind by the previous tenant and carried it around like a prize. At dinner, we ate simple pasta at the wobbly kitchen table. The children talked more than they had in weeks, about school, about friends they missed, about silly things that had nothing to do with fear. Their voices filled the small house with a warmth I hadn't realized I'd been starving for. Later, after baths and bedtime stories, I tucked them into their new beds. Chloe lay under her blanket, looking at me with a gaze too old and too young at once. "Grandma," she whispered, "do you think Mom will get better?" "I hope so," I said. "But until she does, you're safe here." She nodded slowly. "Thank you for finding us." The words struck deeper than she knew. When the house finally fell quiet, I stepped into the living room and sat on the worn sofa. The silence around me was not heavy. It was full of possibility, full of the soft breathing of 2 children finally sleeping without fear. Tomorrow I would call the attorney again. Tomorrow I would begin the long work of stabilizing our new life. Tomorrow I would face whatever Linda brought: anger, apologies, or absence. But tonight the children were asleep in real beds, in a real home, under a roof that would not abandon them. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt something like peace. The first week in the new house passed slowly, each day unfolding with the careful quiet of people relearning how to breathe. Chloe grew softer around the edges, no longer flinching at every unexpected sound. Ben began leaving his bedroom door slightly open at night, not because he feared the dark, but because he trusted the space he slept in. I cooked simple meals, kept the routine steady, and let the air of predictability settle into the walls like a warm scent. Linda did not come. Not the first day after the hearing. Not the second. Not the fifth. She sent one text. I need time. After that, silence. I didn't chase her. At 72, I'd learned that some silences are not absence, but consequence. Still, I left the porch light on each evening. Habit, not hope. One afternoon, a week after the hearing, I sat on the porch sorting through envelopes, school forms, utility bills, a packet from the attorney detailing next steps. Chloe was inside drawing. Ben was in the yard, running a small car along the cracked path, as though steering his life onto smoother ground. The air smelled faintly of cut grass from a neighbor's yard. That's when Linda appeared at the end of the walkway. She looked fragile in a way I had never seen. Her clothes hung loosely, her shoes were worn down at the heel, and her eyes, those bright eyes she once used to charm the world, were dull, like glass pulled from the ocean. She didn't walk toward me with anger, nor with confidence. She walked like a person carrying a confession she didn't know how to say. I didn't stand. I didn't rush to her. I simply watched her approach. "Mom," she said quietly when she reached the porch steps. "Linda." Her gaze drifted past me, toward the window where Chloe's drawing hand paused, but did not stop. Toward the yard where Ben's car froze mid-roll. The children didn't run to her, and she didn't call for them. That silence told her everything. "I saw the house," she said. "I didn't know you found a place so fast." "I had to," I answered. "They needed stability." She nodded slowly, as if absorbing a truth she'd resisted for too long. "I went back to the Walmart lot yesterday," she said. The space where we parked. It was empty. "You're not living there anymore," I said. "That part is over." Her throat worked before she spoke again. "Do they hate me?" "No," I said. "But they're tired. And they're healing." She blinked, tears gathering, but not falling. "I made everything worse, didn't I?" "Linda," I said gently, "you made choices you couldn't afford, and the children paid for them." She sank onto the bottom step, head bowed. I didn't mean to hurt them. I just kept thinking the next job, the next break, the next person would fix it all. That's not how fixing works. "I know that now," she whispered. We sat in silence for a while, the air shifting around us, the afternoon light slanting across the porch floor. Finally, she looked up at me, her voice small and bare. "Can I see them? Just for a moment?" "You can," I said. "But you will not take them. Not today, not soon, not until you have done the work you avoided for years." She nodded, accepting the boundary without argument. She stood slowly and stepped toward the yard. Ben watched her approach with cautious eyes, then lifted a hand in a small wave. Chloe joined him a moment later, standing at his shoulder. They didn't run to her, but they didn't turn away either. They simply stood still, waiting for whatever version of their mother this moment brought. Linda knelt in front of them. "I'm sorry," she said softly. for everything. Chloe didn't speak. Ben whispered, "Okay," in the honest way small children forgive, not because they fully understand, but because they want the world to be gentle. Linda cried then, not loudly, not dramatically, but in the quiet way truth breaks a person open. She stayed only a few minutes. When she rose, she looked older than I had ever seen her. "Thank you," she said to me as she stepped back onto the walkway, "for not giving up on them." "I haven't given up on you either," I replied, "but I won't let you take them down with you again." She nodded, accepting the line she could not cross. Then she left. No shouting, no threats, no promises she couldn't keep. Just a woman finally facing the truth of her own life. After she disappeared around the corner, I walked inside. The children followed, leaning into me with the ease of people who finally knew where they belonged. I closed the door gently, feeling the weight of the world shift just slightly, lighter now, steadier. I sat on the old sofa and let the late sunlight warm my hands. The house was quiet, peaceful, held together by something far stronger than anger or fear. It was held together by dignity reclaimed, by boundaries held firm, by a love that chose action over sentiment. Linda's fall had been inevitable, but my standing had been deliberate. And in that quiet victory, I felt no triumph, only certainty. The kind that stays. If you've read this far, if this story struck something in you, then you already know. Love isn't silence. Love is action. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to bend. If this touched you, share it. Someone out there might need to hear it too.